The Great Council Hall was bigger than most cities. Its walls stretched up so high that clouds formed near the ceiling. Representatives from hundreds of alien species sat in floating pods that moved slowly around the massive space. Each pod glowed with different colors. Blue for the proud Velthani, deep purple for the ancient Morgek, and bright white for the calculating Zephyrians. In the center of this enormous room sat 4 humans in simple gray chairs. They looked tiny compared to the alien delegates around them. Ambassador Hyunwoo sat perfectly straight, his hands folded on the table in front of him. Next to him, Dr. Yunbi checked her datapad one last time. General Tae-min stared ahead with calm eyes, while Counselor Jun-ho quietly organized his papers. The humans had been coming to these meetings for over 100 years. Their great-grandparents had first joined the Galactic Council when Earth made contact with alien civilizations. Back then, the aliens had seemed happy to welcome humans into their community. They said humans were interesting and full of potential. But things had changed over the past few years. The aliens started complaining about human colonies spreading too fast across the galaxy. They said humans were taking up too much space and using too many resources. Some alien leaders called humans primitive and dangerous. Council Speaker Velthara floated high above the room in her golden pod. Her voice echoed through the hall as she spoke. We have discussed the human problem for many cycles now. Today we will vote on the final solution. Hyunwoo did not move. He had heard worse words than human problem in these halls. The aliens no longer tried to hide their feelings about his species. The human colonies have spread to over 8,000 star systems, Velthara continued. This expansion is uncontrolled and threatens the balance of our galaxy. Humans build their cities without asking permission. They change planets without following proper procedures. They ignore our guidance and make their own rules. A Morgek delegate spoke up from his dark red pod. Humans are like children playing with fire. They do not understand the damage they cause. We must control them before they destroy everything. Dr. Yunbi's fingers tightened slightly around her datapad, but she said nothing. She had spent 40 years developing medical treatments that saved millions of alien lives. She had shared her research freely with anyone who asked. But now these same aliens called her people dangerous children. The Zephyrian analysis is clear, announced another delegate in a voice like grinding metal. Human technology is borrowed and poorly understood. They copy our designs without comprehending the science behind them. They are a risk to galactic security. General Tae-min almost smiled at this. He remembered when Zephyrian ships had been trapped in an ion storm 5 years ago. Human rescue ships had saved them using borrowed technology that the Zephyrians themselves could not operate. More aliens spoke up, each one adding their voice to the growing list of human faults. Humans were too aggressive. Humans were too curious. Humans asked too many questions. Humans changed things too quickly. Humans could not be trusted with advanced technology. Counselor Jun-ho listened to each complaint. He had worked with many of these aliens for decades. He had helped them solve trade disputes, negotiate treaties, and coordinate research projects. Now they spoke about humans as if they were a disease that needed to be cured. The solution is simple, Velthara announced. Humans must abandon 70% of their colonies immediately. The remaining human settlements will be placed under alien supervision. Human research and development will be monitored by council scientists. Human ships will require permits for interstellar travel. The aliens in the floating pods began to cheer. Finally, someone was taking action against the human threat. They had been patient long enough. Human delegates will no longer have voting rights in council decisions, Velthara continued. Instead, humans will send reports about their activities for council review. This guided development program will help humans learn proper galactic citizenship. Hyunwoo felt something cold settle in his stomach. Guided development. That was the same program the aliens had used on 3 other species over the past 1,000 years. Those species still existed, but they had never been allowed to govern themselves again. They lived in small, controlled areas and followed alien rules for everything. We call for a vote, Velthara declared. All in favor of Resolution 447 Alpha, the Human Limitation Accord. Pod after pod lit up with approval signals. Blue lights, purple lights, white lights, and dozens of other colors filled the hall. The aliens voted quickly as if they had been waiting years for this moment. Hyunwoo watched the vote counter climb, higher and higher. 800 votes, 820, 840. The final count, Velthera announced with satisfaction in her voice, is 847 votes in favor, 0 votes against, with 1 abstention from the neutral axiom. The hall erupted in celebration. Aliens congratulated each other on finally solving the human problem. Some delegates were already making plans for taking over the best human colonies. Hyunwoo stood up slowly. His chair made a small scraping sound against the floor, but in the noise of celebration, no one noticed. He picked up his folder of documents and tucked it under his arm. Dr. Eunbi looked at him with questioning eyes. Hyunwoo nodded once, and she began gathering her own materials. General Taemin closed his datapad and stood up. Counselor Jun-ho stacked his papers neatly and put them in his briefcase. The 4 humans walked toward the exit door. Their footsteps echoed quietly in the enormous hall, but the aliens were too busy celebrating to pay attention. Some aliens noticed them leaving and assumed they were going to discuss surrender terms. A few delegates laughed and made jokes about humans running away. But most of the aliens ignored them completely. Hyunwoo reached the massive door that led out of the council hall. He stopped and turned around one last time. For over a century, humans had sat in those gray chairs and tried to be good galactic citizens. They had shared their knowledge, helped solve problems, and followed the rules. They had hoped to build a better future for all species in the galaxy. Now he looked at hundreds of aliens celebrating the decision to treat humans like children. These aliens thought humans were primitive and dangerous. They believed humans had nothing valuable to offer. They wanted to control every aspect of human life. Hyunwoo took a deep breath and walked through the door. Dr. Eunbi followed him, then General Taemin, then Counselor Jun-ho. The door closed behind them with a soft sound. Within 6 hours, every human embassy in the galaxy received the same message. All diplomatic missions are to cease operations immediately. Evacuate all personnel within 72 hours. Destroy all classified materials. Humanity withdraws from galactic affairs effective immediately. The message was signed by all 4 delegates and stamped with the official seal of the Human Colonial Council. By the end of the week, human embassies across 800 worlds were empty. Human trade ships stopped making deliveries. Human research stations went dark. Human communication networks shut down one by one. When aliens tried to contact human worlds directly, they received only automated responses. This communication channel has been discontinued. Please direct all inquiries to your local galactic council office. The humans had not argued. They had not threatened. They had not demanded explanations or begged for mercy. They had simply listened to the galaxy's decision and walked away. Most aliens assumed this was temporary. Surely humans would come back in a few months, ready to accept the new rules. After all, where else could they go? But as days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, it became clear that something unprecedented had happened. For the first time in galactic history, an entire species had chosen to leave rather than submit. The humans were gone, and they had taken their secrets with them. Captain Moran had been flying cargo ships for 30 years. She knew every trade route in the Velthani sector like her own heartbeat. The hyperspace relay stations along the major shipping lanes were as familiar to her as her own ship's bridge. That's why she felt confused when her navigation system started showing error messages. "Computer, run diagnostic on hyperspace relay network," she commanded. "Diagnostic complete. Hyperspace relay stations 447 through 891 are offline. Cause unknown." Moran frowned. Those relay stations covered the entire trade route between Velthani Prime and the resource worlds in the Outer Rim. Without them, cargo ships would have to use old-fashioned, slower-than-light engines, turning a 3-day journey into a 6-month nightmare. "When did they go offline?" she asked. Relay stations began shutting down systematically 6 days ago. Shutdown sequence initiated from Human Maintenance Facility on Station Beta 7. Human Maintenance Facility. Miran felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She had heard about humans leaving the galaxy, but she never thought it would affect her directly. The hyperspace relay network had been working perfectly for decades. How could it depend on humans? She tried to contact Station Beta 7, but got only an automated message. This facility has been permanently closed. All maintenance contracts have been terminated. Contact your local Galactic Council office for assistance. Miran was stranded halfway between two star systems, with a cargo hold full of medical supplies that were desperately needed on Velthani Prime. She sent an emergency signal to Galactic Council headquarters. This is Captain Miran of the cargo vessel Brightwing. I need immediate assistance with the hyperspace relay network. The response came 12 hours later. Captain Miran, we are aware of the relay network problems. Our best engineers are working on a solution. Estimated repair time is 6 to 8 months. 6 to 8 months. Miran stared at the message in disbelief. The aliens had always bragged about their superior technology and ancient wisdom. How could they take 8 months to fix something that humans had maintained easily? She was not the only one having problems. All across the galaxy, systems that had worked smoothly for decades were suddenly failing. On the research station Kepler 7, Dr. Wu Jin's absence became a crisis when the experimental quantum reactor started showing dangerous instability readings. The alien scientists who had worked with Dr. Wu Jin scrambled to understand his control systems. Dr. Zeftal, the station's chief physicist, had always dismissed Wu Jin's methods as crude human approximations. Now he stared at equations that made no sense to him. The reactor core temperature is rising beyond safe limits, reported his assistant. The automatic cooling system should have activated, but it's not responding. Dr. Zeftal pulled up Wu Jin's maintenance files. The human scientist had left detailed notes, but they were filled with calculations that seemed to violate known physics. Variables that should not exist appeared in every equation. Mathematical functions that had no basis in established science somehow produced accurate results. This is impossible, Dr. Zeftal muttered. These equations predict quantum behavior that contradicts everything we know about particle physics. But the reactor was behaving exactly as Wu Jin's impossible equations predicted. Without the human scientists' intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics, the alien researchers could only watch helplessly as their most advanced research station moved toward catastrophic failure. Similar problems appeared everywhere humans had worked. On the merchant world of New Zanzibar, the cargo transportation system ground to a halt. The system had been designed and maintained by Merchant Captain Bora, a human who seemed to have an almost magical ability to coordinate complex logistics. The Alien Port Authority had always assumed that Bora simply followed their standard procedures. They discovered too late that her standard procedures were actually a sophisticated network of real-time adjustments that kept cargo flowing smoothly through thousands of possible bottlenecks. How did she predict which ships would be delayed? Asked Port Director Velhan as he stared at weeks' worth of backed-up cargo. Her files show that she tracked weather patterns, mechanical failure rates, crew fatigue cycles, political tensions, and 17 other variables, replied his assistant. She adjusted shipping schedules continuously based on predictions we don't understand. Without Bora's constant adjustments, the port's efficiency dropped by 70% almost overnight. Ships waited in orbital holding patterns for days. Cargo containers piled up in enormous stacks. The Port Authority tried to hire alien logistics experts, but none of them could understand how Bora had made everything work so smoothly. The most disturbing problems appeared in the galaxy's communication network. Systems Administrator Dong Huan and his team had maintained the quantum entanglement communicators that allowed instant messages between star systems. The aliens had barely noticed these simple human technicians working in the background. Now, communication stations across the galaxy were going dark one by one. The quantum entanglement fields that enabled faster-than-light communication were destabilizing without constant human adjustment. The quantum coherence patterns are collapsing, reported communication specialist Axthel on one of the few remaining functional channels. We need to recalibrate the entanglement generators immediately. But the calibration procedures Dong Huan had used were beyond alien understanding. His maintenance logs contained references to quantum intuition protocols and probability cascade adjustments that made no sense to alien scientists. He was just a technician, insisted Chief Engineer Morgeth. How could a simple human technician understand quantum mechanics better than our best scientists? The answer came too late to help. As more communication stations failed, entire sectors of the galaxy became isolated from each other. Trade negotiations stopped. Military coordination became impossible. Emergency services could not respond to distant crises. On the industrial world of Morgek Prime, the effects of human absence became a disaster. Engineer Solbin had spent 20 years quietly upgrading the planet's manufacturing systems. She had always been polite and helpful, offering small improvements that made production more efficient. The Morgek engineers had accepted her suggestions without thinking much about them. Solbin's modifications seemed simple and obvious. Better cooling systems here, improved power distribution there, more efficient waste processing everywhere. Now, without Solbin's constant maintenance, those simple improvements began to fail in cascading patterns. The improved cooling systems required adjustments that only Solbin understood. The power distribution network had dependencies that existed only in her mind. The waste processing improvements were connected to dozens of other systems in ways that no one else had mapped. The entire planetary manufacturing grid is collapsing, reported Factory Supervisor Morket, in growing panic. Production efficiency has dropped 50% and continues falling. Engineers worked desperately to understand Solbin's modifications, but they found systems within systems, each more complex than the last. What had looked like simple human improvements were actually sophisticated integration networks that touched every aspect of the planet's industrial infrastructure. The worst part was that Solbin had tried to teach them. Her files contained detailed explanations and training materials. But the Morgek engineers had been too proud to learn from a primitive human. They had assumed they could figure out anything they needed to know. Now they realized that Solbin's knowledge went far beyond simple engineering. She had understood the planet's industrial ecosystem in ways that took decades of experience to develop. Her improvements were not just technical upgrades, they were an entirely new approach to manufacturing that integrated efficiency, safety, and sustainability in ways that alien engineering had never achieved. As news of these failures spread across the galaxy, a disturbing pattern emerged. In every case, humans had been quietly maintaining systems that aliens thought they understood. The primitive human workers had actually been the foundation that kept galactic civilization running smoothly. The aliens had dismissed human contributions as simple labor or copied technology. They had never bothered to learn how humans did their jobs so well. Now they discovered that humans had not been copying alien methods at all. They had been developing entirely new approaches that were far more advanced than anything in alien databases. The galaxy's leaders called emergency meetings to discuss the crisis. But without the human-maintained communication network, coordination became almost impossible. Some sectors received messages days late. Others received no information at all. "How long until we can restore basic services?" asked Council Speaker Velthara during one of the few successful long-distance communications. "Our best estimates suggest 18 months to restore hyperspace relay networks, 2 years for full communication restoration, and at least 3 years to understand human industrial modifications," replied Chief Engineer Kethnar. 3 years? Velthara could hardly believe it. How could humans be maintaining systems we cannot understand? The question hung in the air without an answer. Across the galaxy, millions of aliens were beginning to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. The humans they had dismissed as primitive and dangerous. 2 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. What started as minor system failures had grown into a crisis that threatened the foundation of galactic civilization. The proud aliens who had voted to control humanity now faced the collapse of everything they had taken for granted. On Morgek Prime, the industrial heart of the ancient Morgek Empire, Factory Supervisor Morket stood in the middle of what had once been the galaxy's most advanced manufacturing complex. Now, half the production lines were silent. The massive machines that had run continuously for centuries were breaking down faster than engineers could repair them. "Status report," Morket demanded, though he already knew the answer would be bad. "Production Facility 7 has been offline for 6 days, reported his assistant. "The automated systems that Maintenance Chief Kyung-Soo installed are finally failing. We cannot restart them without his override codes." Morket closed his eyes in frustration. Kyung-soo had been a quiet human who worked the night shift constantly, making small adjustments to keep the ancient machinery running smoothly. The Morgek engineers had barely noticed him, assuming he was just following maintenance protocols written by superior alien minds. Too late, they discovered that Kyung-soo had essentially rebuilt their entire industrial complex from the inside. His small adjustments were actually a complete integration of human engineering principles with Morgek technology. The result had been manufacturing efficiency that exceeded anything in galactic history. "What about the backup systems?" Morket asked desperately. "The backup systems depend on the primary systems that Kyung-soo maintained. Without his monitoring protocols, we cannot safely restart production. We risk catastrophic equipment failure." Across the galaxy, similar disasters were unfolding. Admiral Na Young had been coordinating joint defense operations for over 15 years, but the aliens had always assumed their own commanders were making the strategic decisions. They never realized that Na Young was quietly managing a complex network of information sharing, resource allocation, and tactical coordination that kept their separate fleets working together. Now, with the next Devourer incursion predicted within months, Fleet Commander Axthun discovered that the alien forces had no unified command structure. Each species operated according to their own protocols. Communication between fleets was chaotic. Supply lines were inefficient. Strategic planning was almost impossible. "How did we coordinate the defense of the Kepler sector?" Axthun asked his staff during an emergency meeting. "According to our records, the operation was planned by Zephyrian strategists and executed by Velthani tactical teams," replied his intelligence officer. "But the Zephyrians claim the Morgek Empire provided the strategic framework, and the Morgek insist the operation followed Velthani protocols," Axthun said in confusion. The truth was becoming clear. Admiral Na Young had been translating between different alien command structures, creating the illusion that each species was leading while actually coordinating their efforts behind the scenes. Her removal had shattered the defense network that protected the galaxy from its greatest external threat. The Devourers were massive creatures that lived in the void between galaxies. They fed on energy and matter, consuming entire star systems when they emerged from hyperspace. Individual alien fleets could fight them off temporarily, but only coordinated multi-species operations could drive them back permanently. "We need to restore the defense network immediately," Axthun ordered. "Contact all fleet commanders and establish unified protocols." But without Na Young's careful coordination, the alien commanders could not agree on anything. The Zephyrians wanted to use their precision strike tactics. The Velthani preferred massive assault formations. The Morgek insisted on using their ancient battle strategies that had worked for 1,000,000 years. Each species thought their way was best. None of them understood how Na Young had made all their different approaches work together effectively. On the diplomatic front, the situation was even worse. Ambassador So Young had spent decades quietly mediating disputes between dozens of species. Her careful work had prevented countless wars and maintained the delicate balance of galactic politics. Without her influence, old conflicts began erupting across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Trade Collective accused the Velthani Republic of stealing their shipping routes. The Morgek Empire claimed ancient territorial rights that conflicted with Axiom colony claims. 3 different species declared sovereignty over the rich mining systems in the neutral zone. "These disputes should be easy to resolve," insisted diplomatic coordinator Velthara during a crisis meeting. "We have established procedures for territorial conflicts." But every time one dispute was resolved, 2 more appeared. The careful diplomatic balance that So Young had maintained was collapsing as species remembered grievances they thought were settled decades ago. "The Zephyrians refused to recognize the mining treaty we negotiated last cycle," reported a staff member. "They claim the human ambassador tricked them into accepting unfavorable terms. The Velthani are mobilizing their border fleets. They say, the Morgek are violating the demilitarization agreement. The Axiom have declared neutrality in all conflicts, but they're demanding compensation for damages to their trade stations." Velthara realized with growing horror that Ambassador So Young had not just been attending diplomatic meetings. She had been the invisible thread that held galactic politics together, constantly negotiating between species that barely understood each other's motivations. The medical crisis was equally devastating. Dr. Haya Jin had been developing treatments For diseases that affected multiple alien species, her research had required understanding biological systems that were completely different from human physiology. Somehow, she had found ways to create medicines that worked across species barriers. Now, plagues were spreading on several worlds as preventive measures failed. The Morgek were suffering from a respiratory infection that their immune systems could not fight. The Zephyrians were experiencing a neurological disorder that affected their group consciousness. The Velthani were dealing with a genetic mutation that threatened their reproductive cycle. Dr. Hyajin's research files are encrypted, reported Medical Director Kethnal. We cannot access her treatment protocols. What about her published papers? Asked the Galactic Health Council. Her published papers only contain basic information. The advanced treatments require intuitive adjustments that she never wrote down. She treated each patient differently based on observations we don't understand. The alien doctors had assumed that Dr. Hyajin was simply following standard medical procedures. They discovered too late that she had been developing entirely new approaches to cross-species medicine that went far beyond anything in their medical databases. The food crisis was perhaps the most immediate threat. Agricultural Coordinator Chan Wu had been managing crop production across hundreds of worlds. The aliens had thought he was just implementing their agricultural science. In reality, he had been developing sophisticated ecosystem management techniques that sustain the galaxy's growing population. Without his crop rotation algorithms, agricultural yields began dropping dramatically. Soil quality deteriorated on farm worlds. Plant diseases spread unchecked. Weather management systems failed to protect crops from climate variations. How long before we have serious food shortages? Asked Emergency Coordinator Morgan. Based on current production rates, we will face critical shortages within 8 months, replied Agricultural Specialist Yeltran. Some Outer Rim colonies are already reporting food riots. The aliens tried to implement emergency rationing, but they discovered that their food distribution system had also depended on human coordination. Chan Wu had been managing not just production, but transportation, storage, and distribution networks that kept food flowing efficiently across the galaxy. As the second year of humanity's absence continued, the accumulated failures began creating cascade effects. Industrial problems led to equipment shortages that made agricultural problems worse. Communication failures made it impossible to coordinate emergency responses. Diplomatic conflicts interfered with resource sharing between species. The galaxy's leaders finally admitted what they had been trying to ignore. Humans had not been junior partners in galactic civilization. They had been the foundation that made everything else possible. We need to contact the humans immediately, declared Council Speaker Velthara during an emergency session. We must negotiate their return before the situation becomes irreversible. But every attempt to contact humanity failed. Human colonies were empty but undamaged, as if the entire species had simply vanished. Long-range sensors detected no human ships or settlements anywhere in known space. Where did they go? Asked Intelligence Director Zefkal. Our best analysis suggests they may have left the galaxy entirely, replied Explorer Captain Axthun. We have detected unusual energy signatures at the galactic rim, but we cannot identify their source. The possibility that humanity had actually left the galaxy was almost too frightening to consider. If humans were really gone, the aliens would have to rebuild their entire civilization from scratch. Thousands of years of progress might be lost. But even more terrifying was the growing evidence that humans had been Fae. As the galaxy crumbled, the Council authorized the largest search operation in galactic history. 10,000 ships from every major species spread across human space, desperately looking for any trace of where humanity had gone. Fleet Commander Velthara led the operation from her flagship, determined to find the answers that might save galactic civilization. The first discovery came from the human homeworld of Earth. Scout Captain Morgan landed in what had been the bustling city of New Sol. His boots echoed strangely on the empty streets as he walked between abandoned buildings that still hummed with power. The city is completely intact, he reported to the fleet. All infrastructure is functional. Power, grids are active, water systems are running, but there are no humans anywhere. The aliens walked through empty homes where meals sat half-finished on tables. Children's toys lay scattered in gardens where flowers still bloomed. Personal belongings remained untouched, as if the owners had simply stepped outside for a moment and never returned. "This makes no sense," muttered Scout Commander Axethel as he examined a human school. "There are no signs of evacuation, no packed bags, no transportation records, no emergency broadcasts. How does an entire population just disappear?" Security. Chief Zeftal ran detailed scans of the abandoned cities. No evidence of violence or struggle, no bodies, no destruction, no indication of forced removal. It appears that humans simply decided to leave everything behind and walk away. But walk away to where? That question became more disturbing with each world the search teams visited. On New Tokyo, they found automated factories still producing goods with no one to collect them. On New Berlin, space elevators continued operating, on schedule, lifting cargo to empty orbital stations. The pattern was the same everywhere, perfectly maintained human settlements with no humans in them. It was as if an entire species had simultaneously decided to abandon their lives and vanish into space. Xenoarchaeologist Dr. Morgan made the first significant discovery on New Sol. While examining the empty city's underground systems, his sensors detected massive energy readings coming from below the financial district. "There's something down here," he reported to his team. "The tunnel system extends much deeper than city records indicate." Following the energy signature, Dr. Morgan's team discovered an entrance hidden beneath what appeared to be a maintenance building. The door was clearly human-made, but constructed from materials that did not exist in any galactic database. "The composition readings are impossible," reported scanner technician Yeldris. "This metal should not be able to exist in normal space-time. The molecular structure violates known physics." Beyond the door lay a vast underground complex that stretched for kilometers in every direction. The construction was clearly human, but the technology was unlike anything the search teams had ever seen. Machines hummed quietly in vast chambers, their purpose completely unknown. "How long has this been here?" asked Dr. Morgan. "Carbon dating suggests construction began approximately 50 years ago," replied his assistant. "But the energy signatures indicate this facility has been operational for much longer than that should be possible." The machinery was still running, processing unknown materials and generating enormous amounts of power. Displays showed readouts in human languages, but the data made no sense to alien scientists. Mathematical formulas covered the walls, describing physical laws that contradicted everything in galactic science. "These equations predict faster-than-light travel without hyperspace transition," observed physics specialist Kethnar. "That should be impossible according to quantum mechanics. This formula describes matter conversion that exceeds theoretical efficiency limits by a factor of 10,000, added energy analyst Velmeth. The aliens photographed everything they could find, but the more they studied the human facility, the less they understood. The technology was not just advanced, it seemed to operate on entirely different scientific principles. Meanwhile, long-range sensor arrays operated by scanner technician Yeldris detected strange energy signatures at the edges of known space. Objects were moving beyond the galactic rim at speeds that should have been impossible. "The signatures match human quantum resonance patterns," Yeldris reported to Fleet Commander Velthera. "But the energy output is enormous. Whatever is out, there is much larger than any known human vessel." "How large?" Velthera asked. "Based on the energy signatures, each object is approximately the size of a small moon. We have detected 17 such objects moving away from the galaxy at approximately 12 times the speed of light." The revelation was staggering. Humans had somehow built vessels the size of moons and achieved faster-than-light travel that surpassed anything in galactic technology. But when had they developed such capabilities, and how had they kept it secret? Chief Investigator Zeftal made another disturbing discovery while analyzing evacuation patterns. "The human departure was not spontaneous," he announced during a briefing with fleet commanders. "Analysis of power consumption records shows that humans began reducing their industrial activity 6 months before they left the Council." 6 months? Velthera was shocked. "That means they were planning to leave before the vote." "The evidence suggests that humans anticipated the Council's decision and prepared accordingly. They had been gradually shutting down non-essential operations and transferring resources to unknown locations." This revelation forced the aliens to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the final Council session. Had Ambassador Hyanwu known what was coming? Had humanity been preparing? To leave regardless of the vote outcome, there's more, Zeftal continued. Analysis of human communication patterns in the months before their departure shows unusual coordination between colonies that had no apparent reason to communicate. It appears that humans were implementing a galaxy-wide evacuation plan. The scope of human organization was becoming clear. Somehow, humanity had coordinated the simultaneous evacuation of 8,000 star systems without any alien intelligence service detecting their preparations. The logistics alone should have been impossible. How do you hide the evacuation of an entire species? Wondered Fleet Navigator Axthune. The answer came from an unexpected source. While examining human communication records, cryptographic specialist Morquette discovered that routine maintenance reports contained hidden data streams. The humans were using steganography, he announced. Technical reports, equipment manifests, and maintenance schedules all contained encrypted information that we never detected. They were coordinating their evacuation through official channels that we monitored but did not understand. Every routine message between human facilities had actually been part of a vast communication network that the aliens had been watching but never suspected. For months, humanity had been planning and executing the largest evacuation in galactic history, while aliens assumed they were just doing their normal jobs. The discovery that humans had been operating a secret communication network led to even more disturbing questions. What else had humans been hiding? How long had they been planning to leave? And most importantly, what capabilities did humanity possess that the galaxy had never suspected? Exploration Team Alpha made the most frightening discovery while investigating abandoned human research stations. Deep space monitors that humans had maintained for decades were still operational, but their data logs revealed that they had been tracking threats that no alien species knew existed. These sensors have been monitoring interdimensional breach points for over 20 years, reported Research Director Yelhan. According to the data, reality tears occur regularly throughout the galaxy, but something has been preventing them from expanding. Reality tears? Fleet Commander Velthara had never heard of such things. Breaks in space-time that allow entities from other dimensions to enter our reality. The human sensors show hundreds of potential breach points, but all of them have been somehow neutralized before reaching critical expansion. The data suggested that humans had been quietly protecting the galaxy from threats that would have been incomprehensible to alien science. Creatures from other dimensions, reality-warping anomalies, cosmic-scale disasters that could have destroyed entire star systems. According to these logs, humanity prevented 17 potential reality cascades in the past 5 years alone, Yelhan continued. Each one could have consumed multiple solar systems. The aliens stared at the data in stunned silence. While they had been criticizing human expansion and primitive technology, humans had been secretly defending the galaxy against existential threats that alien science could not even detect. "Why didn't they tell us?" whispered scanner technician Yeldris. The question hung in the air without an answer. Had humans tried to warn the galaxy about these threats? Had the aliens been too arrogant to listen? Or had humanity decided that the galaxy was not ready to learn about the dangers that lurked beyond known space? As the search operation continued, a terrifying picture began to emerge. Humanity had not been the junior partners in galactic civilization. They had been its secret guardians, protecting trillions of beings from threats they could not imagine while pretending to be simple colonists and technicians. The automated systems that humans had left behind were still operating, but they were shutty. 5 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy faced its darkest hour. The Devourers had launched their largest incursion in recorded history, emerging from the void between galaxies in numbers that terrified even the most experienced military commanders. Without human coordination, the alien fleets suffered devastating losses in their first encounter with the cosmic predators. War Council leader Axthune stood in the Emergency Command Center on Galactic Council Prime, watching tactical displays that showed entire star systems going dark. Each red indicator represented billions of lives consumed by the Devourer's endless hunger. "Fleet status report," he demanded, though he already knew the answer would be catastrophic. "Zephyrian 4th Fleet has been completely destroyed. Velthani border defense is retreating from the Kepler sector. Morgek Imperial forces report 70% casualties," his aide reported with barely controlled panic. The aliens had always been able to drive off devourer incursions through coordinated multi-species operations. But without Admiral Na-Young's invisible coordination network, their fleets were attacking independently, achieving nothing but their own destruction. "We need to access human military protocols immediately," Axthun declared. "Break into their classified systems and find out how they coordinated our defenses." The decision violated every treaty and law regarding classified information, but with the galaxy facing extinction, such concerns seemed meaningless. A team of the best alien cryptographers and systems specialists descended on Earth's abandoned embassy, determined to breach human security at any cost. The embassy's main computer systems had been wiped clean, but the aliens discovered that humans had built their facilities with multiple layers of hidden storage. Deep beneath the embassy, behind security doors that required days to break through, they found Director Seung Ho's private archives. Cryptographic specialist Morket led the team that finally cracked the encryption on the classified files. What they found inside changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. "These files are impossible," Morket whispered as he read the first documents. "According to this data, humans have been tracking threats that we never knew existed." Director Seung Ho's files revealed that humanity had been the galaxy's secret protectors for over 2 centuries. While aliens focused on politics and trade, humans had been quietly fighting a hidden war against cosmic-scale threats that would have terrified any other species. Combat analyst Young Six reports documented thousands of interventions against interdimensional parasites that fed on sapient minds. These creatures existed in a realm between realities, invisible to normal sensors but capable of driving entire species insane through psychic infection. Young Sik prevented 3 major outbreak events in the past decade alone, reported intelligence specialist Yeldris as she read through the classified files. Each outbreak could have affected billions of minds across multiple species. The parasites were attracted to areas of high psychic activity, particularly planets with large populations of intelligent species. Young Sik had developed detection methods that could identify parasite infiltration before it reached critical mass, then deployed countermeasures that eliminated the threat without the target populations ever knowing they had been in danger. Chat. Countermeasures are incredibly sophisticated, observed xenopsychology expert Kethnal. Young Sik was essentially performing psychic surgery on an entire galaxy, removing parasitic infections from billions of minds simultaneously. Deep Space Monitor. Yunji's files revealed an even more staggering scope of human protection. She had been coordinating early warning networks against cosmic-scale threats that could destroy entire star systems. Rogue black holes, reality warping, anomalies, temporal paradoxes, and gravitational cascade events that could unravel local space-time. According to these records, Yunji prevented the Rigel system from being consumed by a quantum black hole 3 years ago, reported astrophysics specialist Velmeth. She redirected the black hole's trajectory using gravitational manipulation techniques that are beyond our current understanding. The files showed that humanity had been constantly monitoring the galaxy for threats that alien science could not even detect. Reality storms that could erase matter from existence. Dimensional rifts that allowed hostile entities to enter normal space. Cosmic predators that treated entire star systems as food sources. Humans saved us from a reality cascade in the Vega sector 2 years ago, Velmeth continued in growing amazement. A temporal paradox created by Zephyrian time travel experiments was expanding toward critical mass. Yunji's intervention prevented it from consuming 17 star systems. But the most shocking revelation came from temporal researcher Jin Wu's classified files. He had been preventing causality paradoxes caused by the galaxy's time travel experiments. Several species had developed limited time travel capabilities for research purposes, but they had no understanding of the cosmic dangers they were creating. Jin Wu's calculations show that 3 separate species accidentally created grandfather paradoxes that should have erased them from the timeline, reported temporal physics expert Axthel. Somehow he managed to stabilize the paradoxes and preserve the original timeline. The mathematical complexity of Jin Wu's work was staggering. He had been performing calculations that required understanding of causality mechanics that went far beyond anything in galactic scientific databases. His interventions had prevented multiple timeline collapses that could have unraveled reality itself. This equation describes temporal intervention techniques that violate everything we know about causality, Axthel continued. According to our physics, what Jinwoo accomplished should be impossible. As the aliens read through director Sung Ho's files, they realized that humanity's primitive technology had actually been disguised versions of scientific capabilities that surpassed galactic civilization by thousands of years. The simple human technicians and maintenance workers had been operating equipment that was more advanced than anything the aliens could imagine. Why did they hide their capabilities? Asked War Council leader Ax Thune. Why pretend to be less advanced than they actually were? The answer came in Director Sung Ho's personal logs. Revealing our true capabilities would cause panic across the galaxy, he had written. Most species are not psychologically prepared to learn about the threats that exist beyond their current understanding. We protect them by remaining invisible. Humanity had made a deliberate choice to appear primitive, while secretly protecting the galaxy from cosmic-scale threats. They had sacrificed recognition and respect to maintain galactic stability, allowing alien species to believe they were the advanced civilizations, while humans did the real work of keeping everyone safe. The scope of human sacrifice is incredible, observed psychological analyst Morgan. They accepted being treated as inferiors in order to protect species that looked down on them. The files revealed that humans had been preparing for eventual departure from the galaxy for decades. They had known that their guardianship role would eventually become untenable as alien prejudice against humanity grew stronger. Sung Ho predicted our rejection of humanity 15 years before it happened, reported predictive analysis specialist Zeph Call. His psychological profiles of galactic leadership showed an inevitable trend toward human exclusion. The final entry in Director Sung Ho's logs was prophetic and terrifying. If the Council forces us to leave, they will discover that we were not asking for their acceptance. We were protecting them from forces they cannot comprehend. Without us, the galaxy has perhaps 6 years before total collapse. The cosmic threats we have been managing will overwhelm their defenses. Reality itself may become unstable. The timestamp showed the entry was written 3 years before humanity's departure. 6 years, whispered War Council leader Ax Thune. He wrote that 5 years ago. We have 1 year left. The revelation hit the alien leadership like a physical blow. They had driven away the galaxy's protectors because they thought humans were primitive and dangerous. In reality, humanity had been the only thing standing between galactic civilization and cosmic-scale extinction. As if summoned by their growing understanding, reports began arriving from across the galaxy. Reality breaches were opening faster than monitoring systems could track them. Interdimensional parasites were spreading through populated worlds. Cosmic predators were moving toward the galactic core. Without human protection, the galaxy was defenseless against threats that most species could not even perceive. The Devourer incursion was just the beginning of a cascade of disasters that would consume everything the aliens had built over millions of years. We have to contact humanity immediately, Ax Thune declared. We need to beg them to come back before it's too late. But how do you contact beings who have moved beyond the galaxy itself? How do you apologize for rejecting the people who had been secretly saving your civilization for centuries? And most importantly, would humanity even be willing to return to help the species that had spurned them? As cosmic threats closed in from every direction, the galaxy's leaders finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. They had not just rejected human membership in the galactic community, they had rejected their own salvation. Time was running out, and as the 7th year of humanity's absence began, the galaxy stood on the edge of complete collapse. The Devourer incursion had consumed entire sectors. Reality storms raged unchecked across multiple star systems, and the very fabric of space-time was unraveling without human maintenance. In the depths of space, cosmic predators that had been held at bay for centuries were finally breaking through weakened dimensional barriers. Supreme Council leader Vex Haller stood before the emergency assembly of all remaining galactic leadership. Half the council chambers were empty because entire species could no longer maintain long-distance communication. The proud civilizations that had voted to limit humanity now barely had enough resources to keep their core worlds functioning. We have reached the point of no return, Vex Haller announced to the desperate assembly. Our best scientists estimate complete galactic collapse within 6 months. We have only one option remaining. The option was something that no galactic leader had ever imagined they would need to consider. A public plea for forgiveness from a species they had rejected and driven away. We will broadcast on every remaining frequency, through every communication. Method still functional, Vex Haller continued. We will ask humanity to return and save us from the consequences of our own arrogance. The message was prepared by teams of the galaxy's best linguists, diplomats, and psychologists. Every word was carefully chosen to convey the full scope of galactic regret and the desperate need for human assistance. Broadcasting from Galactic Council Prime, Vex Haller began the transmission that would reach every corner of the galaxy and hopefully extend beyond the galactic rim to wherever humanity had gone. To humanity, wherever you may be in the vast cosmos, we speak now with voices heavy with regret and hearts filled with desperate hope. We, the representatives of the Galactic Council, come before you not as leaders or judges, but as beings who have finally understood the magnitude of our failure. The message was transmitted on quantum entanglement frequencies, hyperspace relay networks, and even primitive radio waves. Every functional communication system in the galaxy carried the same plea into the void. We were wrong about everything. We looked at your rapid expansion across the galaxy and saw aggression where there was protection. We observed your technological capabilities and called them primitive when they were actually so advanced that we could not recognize their sophistication. We judged your behavior as dangerous when you were secretly keeping us safe from threats beyond our comprehension. Reports were already coming in from across the galaxy as alien populations heard their leaders admit to mistakes that had condemned entire civilizations. For over 2 centuries, you served as the galaxy's guardians, while we treated you as junior partners. You prevented cosmic disasters that would have destroyed us all, while we dismissed your work as simple maintenance. You coordinated our defenses against threats we never knew existed, while we believed our own commanders were leading us to victory. Vex Haller paused, knowing that the next part of the message would be the most difficult to deliver. We understand now that you were not seeking our approval or acceptance. You were protecting us from forces that our science cannot comprehend and our minds can barely accept. You sacrificed recognition, respect, and rightful authority to maintain the stability of galactic civilization. You allowed us to believe we were the advanced species, while you did the real work of keeping everyone alive. Across the galaxy, alien populations were gathering around communication devices to hear their leaders apologize to the species they had always considered inferior. When you expanded to new star systems, you were not claiming territory for conquest. You were building early warning networks and defensive positions against cosmic-scale threats. When you integrated your technology with our infrastructure, you were not copying our designs. You were quietly upgrading our capabilities to levels we could never have achieved alone. The broadcast continued for hours, detailing every aspect of human contribution that the aliens had finally discovered. Each revelation was more humbling than the last. Your ambassador Hyunwoo tried to work within our systems, offering partnership and cooperation while protecting our ignorance of the true dangers we faced. Your scientists shared knowledge that we were too proud to recognize as superior to our own. Your engineers maintained systems that we assumed we understood, but that were actually beyond our technological capabilities. The response came not through any communication channel that galactic science could detect. Instead, words began appearing directly in the minds of every alien leader simultaneously, spoken in the familiar voices of humanity's former representatives. Ambassador. Hyunwoo's voice was the first to respond, as gentle and diplomatic as it had always been during council sessions. We tried to work within your systems because we believed in the possibility of true partnership. We hoped that eventually, your species would develop the wisdom to understand the responsibilities that come with cosmic citizenship. When you decided we were a threat to be contained rather than partners to be respected, we honored your choice. Dr. Yunbi's voice followed, carrying the patient tone she had used when explaining medical procedures to alien colleagues. We spent 3 years before our departure teaching your scientists our maintenance protocols and safety procedures. We offered detailed training programs and comprehensive documentation, but your people dismissed our methods as human superstition and crude approximations. You wanted our infrastructure to remain functional, but you refused to learn how to maintain it yourselves. General Taemin spoke next, with the calm authority that had made him effective in coordinating galactic defenses. The threats approaching the galaxy now are beyond anything you have faced in your recorded history. The Devourers are just the beginning. Behind them come entities that exist outside normal space-time, creatures that feed on reality itself. We have spent 7 years in the void between galaxies, building new defenses and preparing for what is coming. The alien leaders listened in stunned silence as humanity revealed the true scope of the cosmic dangers they faced. We tried to prepare you for gradual revelation of these threats, General Taemin continued. Our plan was to slowly introduce your species to cosmic-scale dangers over several generations, allowing you to develop the psychological resilience necessary to comprehend existential threats. But your rejection of our partnership forced us to abandon that approach. The final voice belonged to someone the aliens had never heard before. A person identified only as Coordinator Ron, whose authority seemed to encompass all of humanity's hidden activities. We did not leave the galaxy in anger or spite, Ron explained. We left because forcing our protection upon species that rejected us would have violated the fundamental principles we swore to uphold. Every sapient species has the right to determine its own destiny, even if that destiny leads to extinction. The revelation that humanity had actually left by choice, rather than being driven away, was almost too much for the alien leaders to process. We have spent 7 years preparing for the ultimate test of galactic survival, Ron continued. The cosmic storm that is approaching will determine whether this galaxy can support complex life for the next billion years. We have built facilities capable of evacuating entire populations to safety beyond the galactic rim. We have developed weapons that can fight entities from other dimensions. We have created shields that can protect solar systems from reality storms. Long-range sensors across the galaxy suddenly detected massive objects moving toward them from deep space. The signatures were unmistakably human, but the scale was beyond anything the aliens had imagined possible. The structures approaching your galaxy are evacuation arcs, Ron explained. Each one can safely transport the entire population of a star system to the new galaxies we have prepared for colonization, but we cannot force salvation upon those who do not want it. The alien leaders stared at their sensor readings in amazement. Humanity had spent 7 years preparing not for war against the galaxy that had rejected them, but for the rescue of every species that had spurned their protection. You have 30 days to decide, Ron announced. Accept humanity as equal, partners in galactic protection with full authority to coordinate defenses against cosmic-scale threats, or we will continue our work from beyond the galactic rim. If you choose continued independence, we will honor that choice, but understand that you will face the coming storm alone. The message concluded with a final revelation that shook the foundations of galactic understanding. The entities approaching. This galaxy exists outside normal causality. They have been traveling toward you for 1 billion years, drawn by the psychic emanations of advanced civilizations. We detected their approach 3 centuries ago and have been preparing defenses ever since. Whether those defenses will be enough to save this galaxy depends on whether its inhabitants can overcome their prejudices and work together. As the communication ended, Supreme Council leader Vex Haller realized that humanity was offering the galaxy one last chance at survival. But the offer came with a price. The aliens would have to admit that they needed the species they had always considered inferior. The choice would determine not just the fate of galactic civilization,